Hello everyone and Happy New Year. This is Christine. I want to welcome you back to my channel. Today I'm going to be telling you my top 5 tips for staying motivated this year when you are practicing your instrument. I hope you guys like my new studio setup and you're not too thrown off, although I do seem to move around a lot and record from a lot of different places. So let's just dive in here. Now personally, I've been playing for a little over 2 years now, and my motivation has waxed and waned. It has not been perfectly consistent. And so I just want to tell you the things that I've done to help me get more excited about playing and stay consistent. The first tip I have is to stay consistent. What I do is I have a Google Calendar on my computer that's also on my phone, and I put in the calendar what time I'm going to practice piano every day, and I block off an hour. It doesn't always work out. Sometimes I have to rearrange it. Ideally, you would practice at the same time every day, and also try to practice in the morning because that's the time of day that your brain is most ready to learn new things. If you try to put it off to the end of the day, you're going to want to sit in front of the TV or play a video game likely and think, you know what, I'll just practice tomorrow. So I try to put it earlier in the day. For me, it's typically about lunchtime. But if I miss it or something else comes up, my schedule is always kind of crazy. I will move it into later in the afternoon, but I always try to fit it in. And then you'll want to set a number of days to practice. It may not be reasonable to try to practice 7 days a week, so shoot for 4 or 5 days a week, or even 3 if that's what you have time for. But be consistent about fitting it in. And then the second part of that is not just consistency with the number of days and hopefully the time of day, but if you cannot practice that full hour, or if for you it's 30 minutes 5 times a week, and you can only fit in 10 minutes, do those 10 minutes. So if all you do is your warm-up exercises and play one easy song that you play Mary Had a Little Lamb, call it a day, at least you sat down at the piano, continue to develop some of that muscle memory. Every day does not have to be learning something new. It can just be a repetitive motion, which is still very good for you in learning an instrument. Tip number 2 is not to stay stuck and frustrated. I know with the situation that I'm in, where I'm sort of self-learning using apps instead of having a piano teacher to drive the next point home, it can be frustrating when I'm stuck in a particular area for a long period of time, or I'm stuck on a particularly difficult song. So what I've learned to do is step away from it, because you're never going to stay motivated to play if you're frustrated every time you sit down at the instrument. So instead, go change things up a little bit. One of the things that I did recently was I signed up for a music theory course. Now that's not actually playing the instrument most of the time, but it's still focusing my brain on music, and what I'm going to learn from this music theory class is going to help me with the sight reading and continuing to grow in my skills on the piano. And so I'm mixing things up a little bit, and then hopefully I'll be refreshed. I'll have learned some new things that I will try to apply, and I'll continue to be excited to play when I sit down at the piano. Or you could step back and do something simpler. So if you're stuck on a particularly difficult piece of music, you could step back and try a new piece of something you're more familiar with that will take you less time to learn, and you'll feel accomplished once you complete the piece. But the key is to enjoy what you're doing, because that, most of all, is what's going to keep you wanting to play. My tip number 3 for staying motivated while learning an instrument is to set short-term goals. It's of course great to have something in the future to look forward to, but that's not going to keep you motivated day to day. So you want to be able to have short-term goals that you're working toward. Some examples of short-term goals that I've used are if you're learning with a lesson book or with an app, you may have a particular level that you want to get through by a certain date. So set a goal of that date, maybe put in your calendar which parts of the lesson you're going to complete each day and work towards that. Another short-term goal might be a particular song, and set a goal of 2 weeks to learn the song, or whatever makes the most sense for you. And then when you've learned that song, get to the point where you're really comfortable playing it, and play it in front of somebody so that they can hear what you're doing. And it doesn't really matter if you mess up. I actually think it's great when you're a beginner and you mess up in front of your friends or your family, because if you keep doing it, if you keep getting motivated and playing in front of them, you will eventually start to get compliments because they'll see how you've progressed. If they never saw you play terribly, then they're not going to be as impressed when you start playing really well. As you earn those compliments, it'll make you feel good about yourself, and you'll of course want to keep playing. Tip number 4 that I have is to keep things interesting. And this is very similar to my tips for when you're stuck in a rut or you're frustrated. But sometimes you just get bored. You're not really stuck, but you're working on the same song every day and you've maybe decided you don't like that song as much as you thought. Don't force yourself to continue these small short-term goals if you're no longer interested in them. Keep it interesting, mix it up. The thing you'll notice I do the most is I bounce between these different apps. So I've been using Simply Piano, I've been using Flowkey, I've been using Yousician, I've now started using Tomplay, and I flip back and forth between them. And then I'll go over and try to learn a song, and I'll learn a song for a while, and then I'll go back and do another lesson. This year I also want to get into lesson books, and so that will provide me another thing I can pick up. And that way from day to day, some of us are a little more maybe ADD than others. Other people may be able to just sit and focus and want to work through one thing. But remember, you don't have to progress along the same track as everyone else. I get a lot of comments about how I should be farther along. And then it's funny because I get comments about how well I'm doing and I'm progressing very well for the amount of time I've been learning, especially as an adult beginner. But who cares what other people think? For you, it needs to be fun. It needs to be interesting. You don't have to follow the same track as everybody else as long as you're enjoying what you're doing. And finally, my tip number 5, which personally I think is the most important and also maybe the most serious, is that you need to plan accountability. Being held accountable in all aspects of our lives is very important, and it's no different when you're trying to learn something new. Different ways to do this that I've used are to track your progress. I like to count the number of days I've practiced. So last year I practiced 111 days. That's actually doesn't seem like very much when I think about it. So this year I'm gonna set a goal of practicing more. And when I achieve that, I'm gonna be really excited that I did it. But you can set it short term as well. So you could track if you're more a visual person, you could do a spreadsheet and a graph and track over time how many days each week you're practicing. Some of the apps like Yousician track this for you, but of course they're only tracking your time in that app. But being able to see that progress that you're making, and of course you're gonna have peaks and valleys, but hopefully over time you'll see it grow or stay consistent. Another statistic to track is the number of songs that you've learned. You don't have to keep them all memorized, but it's good to keep a list and see over time what you've learned, because when you look back on that, it's going to motivate you to learn more. Another aspect of accountability is community. Now, those of you who go to work every day or go to church, you know how important community is when it comes to holding you accountable. I have to say that joining YouTube has become one of the best motivators of my learning piano, because I know that I want to show you guys my progress. It doesn't have to be online. If it is online, you can do YouTube, you can do Instagram, there's different ways to get yourself out there, but it can also be in person. So if you have family or friends, again, that you could plan a little concert for, just you want to play 3 songs for them, the goal is for them to see how you're doing and to see your progress over time. And of course, ideally, you would have a live community of other musicians who are learning, but that can be very difficult for most of us. If you're in university or something like that, you may be able to find other students, but for most of us, we're the only ones in our lives learning an instrument. But I think people are excited to see that you're growing as a person. And so it might start out being intimidating, but over time they'll realize it's become part of who you are. And if they're really close to you, they'll want you to succeed and encourage you along the way. And that can only help you. And the last and related part of accountability is tell everyone you know that you're learning an instrument. And they don't have to have seen you play or ever see you play in the future. But knowing that you're practicing and working towards something will spur them to ask you how it's going in normal conversations. So you might call someone up and say, hey, how are you doing? How's the family? And they might say, oh, they're great. How's your piano practice going? And of course, if you haven't been practicing, you're gonna have to tell them, oh, well, you know, I haven't really been practicing. And they might say, oh, why not? It's great that you're learning an instrument, and that provides you that extra little impetus to want to practice, so that when they do say, oh, hey, how's the piano practice going? You could say, oh, it's great, I learned a new song, and you can share that information with other people. It's no fun to develop new skills and to grow as a person and become more well-rounded if you can't share that with other folks. And what I've also, of course, found through having this YouTube channel is that your drive and your motivation motivates other people, which then turns and motivates you because you feel like, well, if I'm motivating other people, I need to keep going because I'm helping others, and that's wonderful. And so all of these things sort of are self-perpetuating and keep the cycle going, which will keep you playing and keep you motivated. So I hope these 5 tips were helpful for you. If you have other tips for staying motivated, please comment down below. Please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, tune in next time, because this year is gonna be very exciting. We're all gonna get better at our instruments, and I hope you will stick around and be a part of this community. Bye.